Hi guys, happy Taco Tuesday again, January 27th. Let's go part 4.
The odious apparatus. Misuse for seizing power. The previous section discussed the risk of individuals and small organizations co-opting a small subset of the country of geniuses in a data center to cause large-scale destruction. But we should also worry, likely substantially more so, about misuse of AI for the purpose of wielding or seizing power, likely by larger and more established actors. 29. In Machines of Loving Grace, I discussed the possibility that authoritarian governments might use powerful AI to surveil or repress their citizens in ways that would be extremely difficult to reform or overthrow. Current autocracies are limited in how repressive they can be by the need to have humans carry out their orders, and humans often have limits in how inhumane they are willing to be. But AI-enabled autocracies would not have such limits. Worse yet, countries could also use their advantage in AI to gain power over other countries. If the country of geniuses as a whole was simply owned and controlled by a single, human, country's military apparatus and other countries did not have equivalent capabilities, it is hard to see how they could defend themselves. They would be outsmarted at every turn, similar to a war between humans and mice. Putting these two concerns together leads to the alarming possibility of a global totalitarian dictatorship. Obviously, it should be one of our highest priorities to prevent this outcome. There are many ways in which AI could enable, entrench, or expand autocracy, but I'll list a few that I'm most worried about. Note that some of these applications have legitimate defensive uses, and I am not necessarily arguing against them in absolute terms. I am nevertheless worried that they structurally tend to favor autocracies. Fully autonomous weapons. A swarm of millions or billions of fully automated armed drones, locally controlled by powerful AI and strategically coordinated across the world by an even more powerful AI, could be an unbeatable army, capable of both defeating any military in the world and suppressing dissent within a country by following around every citizen. Developments in the Russia-Ukraine war should alert us to the fact that drone warfare is already with us, though not fully autonomous yet, and a tiny fraction of what might be possible with powerful AI. R&D from powerful AI could make the drones of one country far superior to those of others, speed up their manufacture, make them more resistant to electronic attacks, improve their maneuvering, and so on. Of course, these weapons also have legitimate uses in the defense of democracy. They have been key to defending Ukraine and would likely be key to defending Taiwan. But they're a dangerous weapon to wield. We should worry about them in the hands of autocracies, but also worry that because they are so powerful, with so little accountability, there is a greatly increased risk of democratic governments turning them against their own people to seize power. AI surveillance. Sufficiently powerful AI could likely be used to compromise any computer system in the world. 30. And could also use the access obtained in this way to read and make sense of all the world's electronic communications, or even all the world's in-person communications, if recording devices can be built or commandeered. It might be frighteningly plausible to simply generate a complete list of anyone who disagrees with the government on any number of issues, even if such disagreement isn't explicit in anything they say or do. A powerful AI looking across billions of conversations from millions of people could gauge public sentiment, detect pockets of disloyalty forming, and stamp them out before they grow. This could lead to the imposition of a true panopticon on a scale that we don't see today, even with the CCP. AI propaganda. Today's phenomena of AI psychosis and AI girlfriends suggest that, even at their current level of intelligence, AI models can have a powerful psychological influence on people. Much more powerful versions of these models, that were much more embedded in and aware of people's daily lives and could model and influence them over months or years, would likely be capable of essentially brainwashing most people into any desired ideology or attitude, and could be employed by an unscrupulous leader to ensure loyalty and suppress dissent, even in the face of a level of repression that most populations would rebel against. Today, people worry a lot about, for example, the potential influence of TikTok as CCP propaganda directed at children. I worry about that too, but a personalized AI agent that gets to know you over years and uses its knowledge of you to shape all of your opinions would be dramatically more powerful than this. Strategic decision-making. A country of geniuses in a data center could be used to advise a country, group, or individual on geopolitical strategy, what we might call a virtual Bismarck. It could optimize the 3 strategies above for seizing power, plus probably develop many others that I haven't thought of, but that a country of geniuses could. Diplomacy, military strategy, R&D, economic strategy, and many other areas are all likely to be substantially increased in effectiveness by powerful AI. Many of these skills would be legitimately helpful for democracies. We want democracies to have access to the best strategies for defending themselves against autocracies, but the potential for misuse in anyone's hands still remains. Having described what I am worried about, let's move on to who. I am worried about entities who have the most access to AI, who are starting from a position of the most political power, or who have an existing history of repression. In order of severity, I am worried about the CCP. China is second only to the United States in AI capabilities, and is the country with the greatest likelihood of surpassing the United States in those capabilities. Their government is currently autocratic and operates a high-tech surveillance state. It has deployed AI-based surveillance already, including in the repression of Uyghurs, and is believed to employ algorithmic propaganda via TikTok, in addition to its many other international propaganda efforts. They have hands down the clearest path to the AI-enabled totalitarian nightmare I laid out above. It may even be the default outcome within China, as well as within other autocratic states to whom the CCP exports surveillance technology. I have written often about the threat of the CCP taking the lead in AI, and the existential imperative to prevent them from doing so. This is why. To be clear, I am not singling out China out of animus to them in particular. They are simply the country that most combines AI prowess, an autocratic government, and a high-tech surveillance state. If anything, it is the Chinese people themselves who are most likely to suffer from the CCP's AI-enabled repression, and they have no voice in the actions of their government. I greatly admire and respect the Chinese people and support the many brave dissidents within China and their struggle for freedom. Democracy is competitive in AI. As I wrote above, democracies have a legitimate interest in some AI-powered military and geopolitical tools, because democratic governments offer the best chance to counter the use of these tools by autocracies. Broadly, I am supportive of arming democracies with the tools needed to defeat autocracies in the age of AI. I simply don't think there is any other way. But we cannot ignore the potential for abuse of these technologies by democratic governments themselves. Democracies normally have safeguards that prevent their military and intelligence apparatus from being turned inwards against their own population. 31. But because AI tools require so few people to operate, there is potential for them to circumvent these safeguards and the norms that support them. It is also worth noting that some of these safeguards are already gradually eroding in some democracies. Thus, we should arm democracies with AI, but we should do so carefully and within limits. They are the immune system we need to fight autocracies, but like the immune system, there is some risk of them turning on us and becoming a threat themselves. Non-democratic countries with large data centers. Beyond China, most countries with less democratic governance are not leading AI players in the sense that they don't have companies which produce frontier AI models. Thus, they pose a fundamentally different and lesser risk than the CCP, which remains the primary concern. Most are also less repressive, and the ones that are more repressive, like North Korea, have no significant AI industry at all. But some of these countries do have large data centers, often as part of build-outs by companies operating in democracies, which can be used to run frontier AI at large scale, though this does not confer the ability to push the frontier. There is some amount of danger associated with this. These governments could in principle expropriate the data centers and use the country of AIs within it for their own ends. I am less worried about this compared to countries like China that directly develop AI, but it's a risk to keep in mind. 32. AI companies. It is somewhat awkward to say this as the CEO of an AI company, but I think the next tier of risk is actually AI companies themselves. AI companies control large data centers, train frontier models, have the greatest expertise on how to use those models, and in some cases have daily contact with and the possibility of influence over tens or hundreds of millions of users. The main thing they lack is the legitimacy and infrastructure of a state. So much of what would be needed to build the tools of an AI autocracy would be illegal for an AI company to do, or at least exceedingly suspicious. But some of it is not impossible. They could, for example, use their AI products to brainwash their massive consumer user base, and the public should be alert to the risk this represents. I think the governance of AI companies deserves a lot of scrutiny. There are a number of possible arguments against the severity of these threats, and I wish I believed them, because AI-enabled authoritarianism terrifies me. It's worth going through some of these arguments and responding to them. First, some people might put their faith in the nuclear deterrent, particularly to counter the use of AI autonomous weapons for military conquest. If someone threatens to use these weapons against you, you can always threaten a nuclear response back. My worry is that I'm not totally sure we can be confident in the nuclear deterrent against a country of geniuses in a data center. It is possible that powerful AI could devise ways to detect and strike nuclear submarines, conduct influence operations against the operators of nuclear weapons infrastructure, or use AI's cyber capabilities to launch a cyber attack against satellites used to detect nuclear launches. 33. Alternatively, it's possible that taking over countries is feasible with only AI surveillance and AI propaganda, and never actually presents a clear moment where it's obvious what is going on and where a nuclear response would be appropriate. Maybe these things aren't feasible and the nuclear deterrent will still be effective, but it seems too high stakes to take a risk. 34. A second possible objection is that there might be countermeasures we can take against these tools of autocracy. We can counter drones with our own drones, cyber defense will improve along with cyber attack, there may be ways to immunize people against propaganda, etc. My response is that these defenses will only be possible with comparably powerful AI. If there isn't some counterforce with a comparably smart and numerous country of geniuses in a data center, it won't be possible to match the quality or quantity of drones, for cyber defense to outsmart cyberfence, etc. So the question of countermeasures reduces to the question of a balance of power in powerful AI. Here, I am concerned about the recursive or self-reinforcing property of powerful AI, which I discussed at the beginning of this essay, that each generation of AI can be used to design and train the next generation of AI. This leads to a risk of a runaway advantage, where the current leader in powerful AI may be able to increase their lead and may be difficult to catch up with. We need to make sure it is not an authoritarian country that gets to this loop first. Furthermore, even if a balance of power can be achieved, there is still risk that the world could be split up into autocratic spheres, as in 1984. Even if several competing powers each have their powerful AI models, and none can overpower the others, each power could still internally repress their own population and would be very difficult to overthrow, since the populations don't have powerful AI to defend themselves. It is thus important to prevent AI-enabled autocracy, even if it doesn't lead to a single country taking over the world. Defenses. How do we defend against this wide range of autocratic tools and potential threat actors? As in the previous sections, there are several things I think we can do. First, we should absolutely not be selling chips, chip-making tools, or data centers to the CCP. Chips and chip-making tools are the single greatest bottleneck to powerful AI, and blocking them is a simple but extremely effective measure, perhaps the most important single action we can take. It makes no sense to sell the CCP the tools with which to build an AI totalitarian state and possibly conquer us militarily. A number of complicated arguments are made to justify such sales, such as the idea that spreading our tech stack around the world allows America to win in some general, unspecified economic battle. In my view, this is like selling nuclear weapons to North Korea and then bragging that the missile casings are made by Boeing and so the US is winning. China is several years behind the US in their ability to produce frontier chips in quantity, and the critical period for building the country of geniuses in a data center is very likely to be within those next several years. 35. There is no reason to give a giant boost to their AI industry during this critical period. Second, it makes sense to use AI to empower democracies to resist autocracies. This is the reason Anthropic considers it important to provide AI to the intelligence and defense communities in the US and its democratic allies. Defending democracies that are under attack, such as Ukraine, and by cyber attacks, Taiwan, seems especially high priority, as does empowering democracies to use their intelligence services to disrupt and degrade autocracies from the inside. At some level, the only way to respond to autocratic threats is to match and outclass them militarily. A coalition of the US and its democratic allies, if it achieved predominance in powerful AI, would be in a position to not only defend itself against autocracies, but contain them and limit their AI totalitarian abuses. Third, we need to draw a hard line against AI abuses within democracies. There need to be limits to what we allow our governments to do with AI, so that they don't seize power or repress their own people. The formulation I have come up with is that we should use AI for national defense in all ways except those which would make us more like our autocratic adversaries. Where should the line be drawn? In the list at the beginning of this section, 2 items, using AI for domestic mass surveillance and mass propaganda, seem to me like bright red lines and entirely illegitimate. Some might argue that there's no need to do anything, at least in the US, since domestic mass surveillance is already illegal under the Fourth Amendment. But the rapid progress of AI may create situations that our existing legal frameworks are not well designed to deal with. For example, it would likely not be unconstitutional for the US government to conduct massively scaled recordings of all public conversations, e.g., things people say to each other on a street corner. And previously, it would have been difficult to sort through this volume of information, but with AI, it could all be transcribed, interpreted, and triangulated to create a picture of the attitude and loyalties of many or most citizens. I would support civil liberties-focused legislation, or maybe even a constitutional amendment that imposes stronger guardrails against AI-powered abuses. The other 2 items, fully autonomous weapons and AI for strategic decision-making, are harder lines to draw since they have legitimate uses in defending democracy, while also being prone to abuse. Here I think what is warranted is extreme care and scrutiny combined with guardrails to prevent abuses. My main fear is having too small a number of fingers on the button, such that one or a handful of people could essentially operate a drone army without needing any other humans to cooperate to carry out their orders. As AI systems get more powerful, we may need to have more direct and immediate oversight mechanisms to ensure they are not misused, perhaps involving branches of government other than the executive. I think we should approach fully autonomous weapons in particular with great caution, 36, and not rush into their use without proper safeguards. Fourth, after drawing a hard line against AI abuses in democracies, we should use that precedent to create an international taboo against the worst abuses of powerful AI. I recognize that the current political winds have turned against international cooperation and international norms, but this is a case where we sorely need them. The world needs to understand the dark potential of powerful AI in the hands of autocrats, and to recognize that certain uses of AI amount to an attempt to permanently steal their freedom and impose a totalitarian state from which they can't escape. I would even argue that in some cases, large-scale surveillance with powerful AI, mass propaganda with powerful AI, and certain types of offensive uses of fully autonomous weapons should be considered crimes against humanity. More generally, a robust norm against AI-enabled totalitarianism and all its tools and instruments is sorely needed. It is possible to have an even stronger version of this position, which is that because the possibilities of AI-enabled totalitarianism are so dark, autocracy is simply not a form of government that people can accept in the post-powerful AI age. Just as feudalism became unworkable with the Industrial Revolution, the AI age could lead inevitably and logically to the conclusion that democracy, and, hopefully, democracy improved and reinvigorated by AI, as I discuss in Machines of Loving Grace, is the only viable form of government if humanity is to have a good future. Fifth and finally, AI companies should be carefully watched, as should their connection to the government, which is necessary, but must have limits and boundaries. The sheer amount of capability embodied in powerful AI is such that ordinary corporate governance, which is designed to protect shareholders and prevent ordinary abuses, such as fraud, is unlikely to be up to the task of governing AI companies. There may also be value in companies publicly committing to, perhaps even as part of corporate governance, not take certain actions, such as privately building or stockpiling military hardware, using large amounts of computing resources by single individuals in unaccountable ways, or using their AI products as propaganda to manipulate public opinion in their favor. The danger here comes from many directions, and some directions are in tension with others. The only constant is that we must seek accountability, norms, and guardrails for everyone, even as we empower good actors to keep bad actors in check.
Okay, let's take a break.